The strike continues, and believe it or not, things are getting weirder. We're going to talk about that and more on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 201 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
And we are almost finished with October. We are getting closer and closer to Halloween. And there's a bunch of stuff we would normally be talking about.
Yes.
Once again, the certain Norse god of mischief.
Norse god works based on certain American poets and short story writers.
So there's a bunch of stuff. And now, of course, once a certain series is done, we can talk about it once it's in the rearview mirror. That'll be something to look forward to. But we've been following the strike, and things are getting a little bit weird. Two little pieces of news was several high-end actors, including George Clooney and Emma Stone. They went to their leadership and said, hey, we got an idea because this looks like this is going to be going on for a while. So in our bylaws for money and fees that actors are charged for being in SAG AFTRA, there's a cap. It's like after $1 million, that's it. So you don't get charged anymore if you make $2 million, $5 million, $10 million. So their first suggestion was get rid of the cap. They said this is going to bring a lot more money into the coffers, and it's going to make it a lot easier to keep the strike going. They also suggested that lower-end actors should get paid residuals first before the stars get paid.
Ooh.
And those were their suggestions. There was several actors that were involved in that. And the SAG AFTRA leadership was like, we don't really want to talk about that right now. I can see both sides of the argument. It would be different if it was a bunch of day players that were like going on and said, hey, they should pay us first and those fat cats should be paying more, It was the top tier actors that were saying this. And so definitely their hearts are in the right place, and I definitely get that. At the same time, I can certainly understand why SAG AFTRA leadership would be like, well, we don't really want to rock the boat on these high-tier actors right now because we have to keep them.
Right now they're supporting.
Yeah, they're very much supporting, and they don't have to.
And
And
they could turn in their cards and go somewhere else.
yeah, well, and not saying that he ever would, but imagine if Tom Cruise crossed the picket line. What would that do to the strike? If a high-tier actor or actress, if they were to cross a picket line, if Margot Robbie were to cross a picket line, what the heck could you do? And that would be the beginning of the end because other people would start crossing the picket line, and that's it. So I can see where right now the leadership of SAG AFTRA is not wanting to rock the boat. This may be something that they visit later, but right now I'm sure that at this point they're like, look, let's just get through this damn strike. There was a video on Twitter, Fran Drescher and a few other people in a conference room, that they were going to be meeting with the AMPTP, and they filmed a video that said, we're here, and they're not here. So they were in the literal room where they were going to sit down and talk, and the AMPTP didn't show up. They didn't even show up, yeah. Yeah, this is getting serious. This could very easily go past Christmas. We may not even see anything happen till the first part of next year. Now, something else that's really interesting, of course, is we've got Halloween coming up right now. And SAG AFTRA released for their actors, they said that you're probably going to be wanting to go to Halloween parties and dress up in costumes. And so that you don't violate SAG AFTRA rules, you need to understand you can't dress up in struck properties.
Wow.
Meaning like Margot Robbie could not go to a Halloween.
She could not be dressed as Barbie. She couldn't.
Yeah.
at this point, well, I don't know what the future of Harley Quinn is.
Well,
On her cinematic universe side of things.
Well, that's a whole issue we can definitely talk about, because that's the news side of things, and we can definitely talk about that. But yeah, they said any struck property, any character that's in a struck property, you cannot dress up in a Halloween costume. They said that is too close to promotion. They're taking.
So what are you dressing up for as for Halloween, Brian?
Well, I'm not going to be dressing up as Barbie.
Good. Okay, so that's definitely struck.
I'll just have to wait till next year to do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
not struck. What can you?
General characters you can definitely dress up as your typical general characters, but anything that's part of a struck property, no, you cannot dress up in a Halloween costume. And they made sure to make a point of that. So basically, they are taking this really seriously, and they're not playing around. But while all this is going on, there's all this crazy news that's pouring in about all the cinematic universes that are
being affected.
That are being affected by all of this stuff. And it seems that while the actors are gone, the producers are tweaking all kinds of stuff. There's been talk, and we can talk about this because even though it is a struck show, this is news. This is about a show that's not out, so we can definitely talk about the news. But the Daredevil Born Again, they fired all the writers. They fired the entire writers' room, and they're starting over.
The writers of that show are the reason that show was the best show that they could have asked for. They had this deal with Netflix. That was prime meat.
Yeah.
That was a center cut. That was a great show.
Yeah.
But
there's no real way to know why they fired the writers. But if I had to make a guess, if money was on the line, and hopefully not a lot of money, but if money was on the line, I would say it's because they created a show that was too close to the Netflix show. And that's not where Disney wants to go with it. That apparently they've got a different idea. Now, why they wouldn't just tell the writers, hey, we need to go a different route with this? Are they that far apart? I don't know. It's
just, there was something so magical about it.
Oh, yeah.
And can it be recaptured with different voices? And some things can. They can. Like, there are iconic characters like Hamlet, but then there are iconic roles that you can't picture anyone else playing. It would be along the same lines of I can't picture anyone else doing justice to this property.
You still have the actors from the Netflix show, or a good chunk of them, who are going to be there. But like I said, they've gotten rid of all the writers. They got rid of the entire writer's room, and they are rewriting from like page one. It's a complete scrap. They're not
tabula rasa.
Yeah, exactly. And so the question is, was the Netflix show they just did not want to go down that road, which is a shame. And then on the DC side, I saw a picture on Facebook of the actors in Justice League. And you know how sometimes you have a cast picture and the people who have passed away, they're grayed out?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was a picture of the Justice League cast with everyone except for Jason Momoa grayed out.
Oh.
Because they've come out and said, we're not bringing back Gal Gadot, we're not bringing back Ben Affleck. Of course, we knew Cavill wasn't coming back. And so apparently the only Jason Momoa after Aquaman, whenever that comes out, who knows when that's ever going to happen. But apparently
that's the end of that cinematic universe.
Yeah, and we talked about before Jason Momoa, there's been these rumors that they're going to use him in another role, so he's not like going away, but he's not going to be doing Aquaman anymore. But they're definitely looking to revamp a whole bunch of stuff. And again, we have all these weird stories that are coming out. Talks about rebooting the original trilogy of Star Wars.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, why would you ever want to do that? I think it was a particular director who said that might be a good thing to do. And I'm like,
if they wanted to do like the first draft when it was Starkiller.
Oh, no.
Yeah. If they wanted to do the first draft, that might be okay. It's just The Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Boba Fett, they've proven that this universe is huge. You can do anything. And you can do so much. You don't have to do the Skywalker trilogy. There's so many more good stories to tell. Stretch out, reach out, grab them. The universe is huge. There's plenty of room.
Well, I've had the chance to read some of the screenplay of the Star Killer screenplay, and it's a first draft for a reason.
Right, yes.
There is a reason why it became what it eventually became and why that first draft didn't make it. So
I love the first draft of Lost Boys. It was described as the Goonies with vampires, and because they were all little kids, vampires, and if they had gone with the first draft, we would have missed out on such a fantastic vampire movie with 3 great endings. That's a great. That movie has 3 great endings.
Yeah,
that you just love. But yeah, first drafts, you're right. First drafts are first drafts for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
They need workshopped. They need beta tested.
Well, and Groundhog Day, and I forget exactly what the number was, but when in the original screenplay, the main character had gone through that day billions of times by the time we start the movie. And for Harold Ramis to direct this movie, he told the screenwriter, I'm not going to change anything. And he obviously lied because he did. But that movie is better, to my opinion, because of the fact that you develop that character and then you put them through it. And that's why that movie works. And if you put that person in media res and they've already gone through this a whole bunch of times and you don't know what the heck is going on, all of that, and you don't
learn with them.
That
was kind of the point of it. We had to learn right along with him to understand what he had been through.
Exactly. It really wouldn't have worked the other way. But I find it so strange that anyone would ever think that doing Star Wars again would be a good idea. And I'm not saying that Disney's considering it. It was, and I forget who the director was, who said, that you should revisit the original Skywalker trilogy and do a reboot. I will say that, and again, I feel so bad that I don't remember this guy's name because apparently it was popping up all over the place. He must have done some interview and was talking about a bunch of stuff, such as he was going to direct X2 and walked off and didn't do it. And the reason why he didn't do this, it was an interesting story, by the way, was that there was a script for X2 that he said, what's this? Because it looked a heck of a lot thicker than the script he was given. And they're like, oh, don't worry about that. He says, he grabbed it. He says, yeah, I'm going to worry about this. And it starts out in Africa with Storm.
Ooh.
There's this drought. And she brings a storm and saves this village. Yeah. It's like the first scene of this movie. Now, I know you have geek-colored glasses.
I do have geek-colored glasses.
So here's the question. This old man's going to try to teach you how to be a little bit cynical because this is going to be horrible. But why do you think that script was written? Because obviously that scene never appeared in X2, never even came close. What's the most horrible reason why that script would exist?
I don't know. Were they going to kill off Storm or?
Oh, this is even worse.
Okay, then no, I don't know.
Oh, well, okay. The reason that they had that script, that was the script they gave to Halle Berry to talk her into doing the movie.
Oh.
So they said, this is the script we're going to do. Sign on the dotted line. She signs on the dotted line. They're like, kidding.
Oh.
Yeah, because then you think about how much Storm was really involved in X2. Well, she certainly wasn't getting any scenes opening the movie.
No. Then that would have been a really cool scene, having a bit of... Because what I'm picturing in my head is origin story for Storm.
Right.
That may not have been their intention. But X2 was such a good movie. The problem with X-Men is it really shouldn't be a movie. It should be a series. There's so many mutants, so many good characters. It should be done in series style. I think even at one point they were... In the early 90s, they were going to do a Generation X movie. They even did a pilot movie. It would have had really bad special effects. We weren't ready for live action X-Men yet. So I'm glad that we didn't get that. It would have been interesting, but glad that we didn't get it.
Oh, yeah. But I will say that looking at a lot of the stuff that's going on with the strike, for some reason, the theme for this week for me has been AI. Because in my day job, I was studying AI. I went to a conference and there was a lot of discussion about AI there that we talked about. There was, and we've talked about Philosophy Tube. And the latest video on Philosophy Tube is about AI and philosophy and ethical AI and how that works. And it goes down a bunch of really interesting rabbit holes. So definitely Abigail Thorne researches the stuff very heavily. And I found it fascinating and made me think about a lot of things about AI that I hadn't thought about before. And there was one other thing that I saw. It was a YouTube short by Vera Wild, and we've talked about her before. She does Counsel Geeks, and she was talking about AI and actors, and she mentioned something I hadn't even thought about, and why the whole AI issue with actors is more complicated in the actor realm than it is for the writer's realm. And it is because, as a writer, all the stuff with AI is speculative. It's not really being used a lot. Now, there's a lot of AI that does get used. There's like programs out there like AutoCrit that uses AI. This podcast depends on AI for a lot of things, because a lot of my editing software that I use uses AI.
Okay.
And that's the reason why, instead of it taking 3 days to edit this podcast, I can do it in 2 hours. And the whole thing's done from start to finish after we recorded it. So AI is very handy. But one of the things I hadn't considered, the reason why AI is tougher in the realm of actors is because they're already using AI there. AI is being used for de-aging. That's how they do that. And because of that, because they're not having to program it stage by stage, restricting AI makes the process of things like the de-aging and some digital special effects more difficult to pull off and more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And that has something to do with the fact that studios are backing off from the whole not using AI or restricting AI, because they depend on it so much for a lot of the stuff that they do now. And so it's not as easy to say we got to back off from AI, because it's all over the place in that realm. And I hadn't considered that before. Of course, I know about de-aging, but I hadn't considered the fact that AI would be a huge component to that. But it makes sense. It definitely makes sense that would be the case. But yeah, I have been studying AI and a lot of the stuff about AI. And I've said many times that I feel like AI is going to affect the world of computers and our lives to the same degree that the graphic user interface did many years ago. Because the graphic user interface made computing possible for the average person, because they didn't need to know how to code.
Right.
And this is going to be the same thing, because even what we can do right now, we think about generative AI and ChatGPT and Google Bard and those type of things. But there are parts of AI that stretch even beyond that. There are different kinds of AI. And it's going to be everywhere. It's in a lot of places now. A lot of state and federal governments are now drawing up documents that clearly define what ethical AI use is. In West Virginia, we already have governmental AI that's being used. The Lottery Commission uses AI for a bunch of different things. Call centers, they are currently working on doing a virtual scratch-off game that you can go online and play.
Whoa.
So, yeah, they were very proud of that. And I was listening to them talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's interesting, but I see the danger there. But then they talked about how the AI built into these games is also, wow, you're playing a lot of this. Maybe you shouldn't.
Okay.
And so that's built into it too. It's
Wow.
like there are so many different levels. Now, of course, the problem with AI is even your subconscious prejudices work into it. And this was something that was brought up in the Philosophy Tube deep dive into AI, is that if you wanted to build a racism machine, say you were giving out grants or job applications and you did not want black people to get the money or to get the job, there's a process that is known as fair washing. And you don't even have to consciously do this. It can develop on its own, but what it is, an AI can basically look at something and goes, okay, that's a female. We're not going to take their job application, which, by the way, did happen.
Oh.
Amazon was using AI to scrub job applications, and female applicants were getting kicked out of the system because while it was crunching the numbers, it figured out, oh, well, women can get pregnant, which means then they need to take leave. So they're not as reliable a workforce as males are. So it began to favor males, even though no programmer ever told it to do that.
Wow.
It did it on its own because it sat there and crunched a few numbers and was like, sure, we could hire a woman. What happens if she gets pregnant? Why take the chance? So that's already happened. But if you were building a racism machine and you wanted to keep black people from getting these jobs or getting these grants or getting this loan, you could build one that says, if it's a black person, boot them. And then come up with a bunch of other reasons why you couldn't give them the loan. That's called fair washing. In other words, the reason they didn't get the loan, they didn't get the job, was because they were black. But this computer can figure out a whole bunch of other reasons why they wouldn't have given it to them.
Oh my gosh.
And they can do that at the speed of freaking light. Think about that. Yeah.
I don't want to think about that. Gah.
So AI can be a little bit tricky. So it's like there's a lot of great things that it can do, but there's also some really god-awful, horrible things that it can do. It's a tool, like a hammer. You give a hammer to a carpenter, you get a house. You give a hammer to a psychopath in a grade school, you get a horrible news item.
Yep.
And AI is the same thing. But again, because it's adaptive technology, it's going to reflect what's going on in our brains, even if we don't consciously realize it. Our biases will become its biases. The whole idea of how do we make AI ethical, get a room of 100 people and ask them what's ethical and see how much agreement you get. If you can't get people to agree on what's ethical, how are you going to get AI to agree on what's ethical?
It's going to be just the HAL computer. Yeah. 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Exactly. And
HAL 9000?
Yeah. But yeah, that computer, of course, it interpreted its instructions in a way that was logical for it. And of course, later on, when you see, they made a sequel to 2001, and you realize that it was basically told to lie, and it couldn't jibe that with its original programming, and there was a conflict. And so it dealt with it the best way that it could. And again, that's what AI is going to do, is it's going to reflect our own values, whether we realize that we're imprinting our values into AI or even what our true values are. And so AI is a wonderful tool, but it's going to be complicated. So it's not even a matter of, again, this whole idea of, and this was another term that we've talked about this on the podcast, but I didn't realize there was a term for it. But the term is digital socialism. In other words, if you create a work of art or I write something, how much of it technically do we own? It's like I have the right, when I write something, that I can sell it and make money off of it, just like you paint something and you want to sell it to a buyer or you want to present it in an art gallery. How much of that do you actually own? In other words, how much of a right do you have for it not to be used in training or as raw material to train an AI? And that's not as easy a question to answer, because think about the fact that even copyrights allow for fair use. They allow for derivations of a work. They allow that this is adapted from a work, but there's enough change to it that it is something that's different. And you're allowed to take something that's copyrighted and you're allowed to tweak it. And really, isn't that what AI is doing? It's not using you whole cloth, but it's using pieces of your work to train an AI. And so it's a derivative work. Everything in AI is, in a sense, a derivative work. And so do you have the right to say, you can't use my stuff? Can you go to court and say, you can't use my stuff? And the question, of course, is if you do go to court, are they going to be using AI to write their decision, which some judges have done?
Oh, no.
There have been That's already come out that there was a judge that used ChatGPT to come up with sentencing. And I have said many times that I see within the next couple of years that slush piles for writers, and a slush pile is this big pile of stories or poems that a publication is having to go through to find the stories they're going to publish. And I have said in many places that I see in a couple of years that slush piles are going to be combed through by AI, and that they're going to be not necessarily saying publish this, but a lot of the stuff that's not ready for prime time and obviously not ready for prime time, just basically clear that out of the way. And even that, a lot of writers said, oh man, no, you cannot do that. That's going to be a huge mistake. And I'm not saying that because I think it's a good idea. I'm not saying it because I feel like it's something that we need to start doing, that there's a benefit to any of it. I'm just saying it's going to happen.
Right.
For good or for bad, however you feel about it, it's going to happen. But we are living in a complicated world, and it's getting more and more complicated as things go along. And like I said, if you study AI, you start to go down a whole lot of rabbit holes.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. And I haven't even touched on the fact that AI is not green technology. It's the exact opposite of green technology, because AI takes energy, and energy has a footprint, and it's a massive one. So there's that aspect of it as well. There are a lot of different aspects to this new technology. And again, we are just, with everything that's going on with the strikes, the Writers Guild strike, of course, SAG AFTRA, which is still going on, that aspect of AI is just like literally the tip of the iceberg. There is all this stuff underlying that is going to become a real issue very, very soon, a lot sooner than a lot of people think. And it's going to be fascinating to see where AI goes and how people use it. Because ultimately, what people are afraid of when it comes to AI is not they're worried about the AI, they're worried about how people are going to use it.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see.
We shall see.
And with that said, we come to the end of episode 201. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrick, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.